Hi, everybody. Nesse here with a really short overview of the smoke detector principle. Here it is in a nutshell. There are a lot of terrible things or bad things that we feel, like anxiety and pain, that seem to go off all the time when they're not really necessary. Why didn't natural selection do a better job? The answer is that those alarms are cheap compared with the terrible things that would happen if they didn't go off when they were needed. Just like a smoke detector, we put up with the cheap false alarms from our smoke detectors when we make toast in the morning to make sure that every single time there's a terrible fire, it goes off. Here's the background. I was helping to develop one of the first anxiety disorders clinics. It was at the University of Michigan with George Curtis in the 1980s. And I kept wondering, why on earth do so many people have so much anxiety, especially panic attacks, where they suddenly have their heart beats fast and they breathe fast and they feel like, I've got to get out of here. Something terrible is going to happen. I might die. And we would take them to the grocery store and help them to realize, no, there's nothing really dangerous there. And over again, they would continue to have panic attacks. What's going on? Well, I started realizing after a while that panic actually, like most emotions, is useful. If in fact you are in a life-threatening situation, everything about a panic attack is useful. The sweating and the pounding heart and the wish to get out of there, it's a good thing you have those responses in a life-threatening situation. But then I started thinking more deeply about it, and I was asking myself, why didn't natural selection do a better job of shaping the mechanism that sets off panic attacks? Why didn't it set them off only when there's actually a lion there, instead of so often when there's a false alarm? I thought about that and thought about that, and eventually I realized this was a decision under uncertainty, because you didn't really know if there was a lion behind the rock or not. And I found my way to something called signal detection theory, which is a mathematical way of trying to figure out when is it optimal to express the response. It was devised by Sweats and Green in 1966 at the University of Michigan, where I was working, but I had never heard of it before. The basic idea is very simple. What you need to know is the cost of the alarm, that is the panic attack. We're going to call that 100 calories. And the cost if you don't have the response and the danger is actually present. Let's call that 100,000 calories. So there you are, you're trying to get water for your family in the desert, or not in the desert, at a watering hole a few thousand years ago, and you hear a little noise behind the rock. Should you run or not? If you run every single time there's a noise, you're never going to get water for your family. However, if you wait until there's a big roaring noise right behind you, you also will never come back for your family. You've got to figure out just how likely that noise is to be a lion to make you flee. So remember we said there was a cost of 100 calories for the panic attack and 100,000 calories if you don't have a panic attack. And in fact, the lion is there. Well, that's a ratio of 1,000 to 1. So if you do the calculation, you realize this means that every time the noise is loud enough to indicate the probability of a lion being there is greater than 1 in 1,000, you should get out of there as fast as you can and have a full-blown panic attack. It'll save your life. But this also means that 999 times out of 1,000, the response will be unnecessary. It'll be a false alarm. So it was actually working with George Williams on our book, Why We Get Sick in 1994, where we were writing a whole chapter about defense responses. And he said, Randy, this needs a name. People won't remember it unless it has a name. Why don't we call it the smoke detector principle? And I think he was exactly right, because we all have smoke detectors and we put up with the false alarms because we know that the false alarms are just annoying compared with the terrible calamity of not being warned about an actual fire. So I've subsequently recognized that this is of profound importance, not just for psychological things, but for all of medicine. Pain, fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, cough. I mean, all of these responses are shaped by and controlled by mechanisms shaped by natural selection. And they're all subject to the smoke detector principle. And that's why When you go to the doctor with any of those symptoms and the doctor gives you a medication to block those normal responses, generally it's okay. It's not like natural selection goofed. Natural selection set the optimal response, and it's usually safe to block them, but not always. And that's why I think every single clinician, psychological or doctors and nurses, they should all understand the smoke detector principle so that they can make good individualized decisions every time a decision is being made about using a medication to block these kinds of responses. This idea also has been extended, especially by Marty Hazelton and David Buss. They have an idea that they called error management theory to apply to cognition. Especially, they began by thinking about the situation where a man is trying to figure out if a woman is sexually interested in him. And it turns out men often make mistakes about that, and they think there might be a good reason why men overestimate a woman's sexual interest. But there are no new ideas, really. This one came from a long time ago. The earliest I can find it very specifically is with the philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal in 1650. He had a much more profound worry to consider. He was trying to figure out, should I believe in God? And he came up with a practical reason. He said that, well, the cost of believing is not that great, but the cost of not believing might be eternal damnation. So I think I'll believe. Nowadays, it would be nice if these simple principles of signal detection theory and the smoke detector principle were made widely available to everybody. And I hope this video will be a little step in that direction. Thank you.